Hello and welcome to the Apple, iPhone, iOS Voiceover Compatible Games interview series. I'm your host, Aaron Spelker. And Apple, iPhone, iOS Voiceover Compatible Games is a group that is focused on all things about gaming and accessibility for mobile platforms. And through our interview series, we interview game developers as well as accessibility influencers. And today we have one of the gaming accessibility influencers calling in from the Midwest. We have Liam Erven. Liam, welcome to the interview series.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, thank you. So what I always like to start with, just to kind of level set for the community, is for you to just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what is the content that you're really putting out into the world for the blind and visually impaired.
So my name is Liam Erven, and I am both a content creator / influencer as well as a developer. I started developing audio games for the blind for PC back in the early 2000s. I am famous and or infamous for creating a little platformer called Super Liam, and it is actually the first audio platformer for the blind. So that is, I guess, my claim to fame. I've kind of shifted now into doing more consultant work and advocacy work and trying to make the gaming space more accessible for everybody. And I've really found that there's a lot of mainstream games that we can sort of play with some work. Obviously, some games need a little more help. And so my focus of my YouTube channel is to play these games, talk about them, how we can play them. I also do a lot of audio-based games, so games that are designed specifically for the blind, and I just get on and have fun and play games, and it's really rewarding to share that with others.
So Liam, we were talking a little bit before, so you've been blind since sight. What was kind of your first introduction to playing a video game? What was the first accessible thing that you really got to play and, realized this is something that you enjoy doing?
So the first video game I actually ever really played, oddly enough, was when I was 4. For Christmas, my family thought it would be a really good idea to buy me a Nintendo. And I don't know why. Looking back, I think it's the strangest thing. It's weird to buy somebody that can't see something called a video game. But I think the thought was, well, all the other kids have them. He seems interested in this stuff. I don't know what he's going to do with it, but it'll entertain him. Probably it'll keep him busy. And I think that was really ultimately what it was. So really, honestly, my first game was Mario Brothers. So Super Mario Brothers for the Nintendo was my first introduction into gaming. And let's be honest, it's not at all accessible. Right. You can't really play it. I mean, there's nothing that tells you what's going on. But what blew my mind and got me interested in video games was that there was something that I was controlling. And I thought that was so fascinating because up until that point, everything on my television wasn't interactive. You couldn't interact with it. It was just there.
Right.
It was passive. It was the same Teddy Ruxpin tape 30,000 times, right? And yes, I was one of those kids. I was a huge Teddy Ruxpin fan. Never actually owned one, but had like all the cartoons recorded on VHS and stuff. So it was just like I wore those things out.
With Super Mario Brothers, did you eventually be like, all right, well, I keep moving to the right twice and I die, so I'm going to, move twice to the right and press this button. Oh, look, I lived a little bit longer.
And I didn't realize at the time that enemies moved. There was a lot I didn't know because I didn't have the context. But I knew I was playing something, and I knew that, like, other people found it interesting, and I had friends, so they would come over and play. And so what I actually learned was I may not be able to play these games, but others can play them, and I can learn about the games vicariously through them. So I always like to say that I think I invented the concept of doing Let's Plays, because like I would rent a game from the store. We'd go to Blockbuster. Remember those days? Like that's long gone, right? But yep. Showing my age here. And you go to Blockbuster and you'd rent a game. And so one of my friends would be like, hey, what game did you get? I'd be like, oh, I got such and such. Do you want to come play it? And so my friends would come play it. And they would describe everything to me and talk about what was on the screen and what was going on. And they would play through it and I would live through them. And so I thought that it was really fascinating. So when I got on YouTube and saw that other people were doing this, it blew my mind. And so I was like, well, why can't I do that with some other games that I play? And so it's kind of where the whole thing started. And it's cool because a lot of other blind people are doing it now. And I think I was one of the first to really try doing it. And I used to do it back in the old days, like on a Icecast server. I'd be like, hey, I'm playing a game. Tune in and listen to me play it. And then when YouTube kind of became a big thing, I was like, hey, now you can watch me play it. And I've kind of built a following over these years. And so it's really kind of cool to trailblaze, I guess. And obviously, like I said, I don't know if I was the first blind person to do it. I was probably one of the first, but it feels good to like kind of trailblaze a bit and do something that really hadn't been done and be like, yeah, look, we can do this. We may not have the same success, but we can try to enjoy games and so there is that.
Yeah, I mean, you have on YouTube alone, you have quite a body of work. I think I saw there was almost 800 videos that you've done.
There's definitely a lot of content. I would say there's hundreds of hours. I've never counted it up, but there's got to be a couple thousand hours of content.
Yeah. What was so if Super Mario Brothers was the first game you played, but not too terribly successful at actually playing it, what was the first game that you remember saying, I actually played this game and, really
I think it would
something?
have been Track and Field 2, made by Konami. And I really, obviously, it was kind of hard to do certain events, but I did realize that, hey, this is doable with some information, and I can be semi-successful with it. And I just loved it. I thought it was really cool.
A lot of button mashing in that one, right?
Yeah, the old Track and Field games were literally, you want to run, jam on the A and B button.
A, B. Yeah.
Or if you have a turbo advantage, just hold them down and, take a nap or something. I don't know. Right. But I got into that, and then I think when I really realized there were games I could play was when the fighting games started coming out. So Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat. I kind of realized I could learn these and actually do okay at them. And my mom likes to tell the story about how I rented Mortal Kombat and got good at it. And so all the kids were like, dude, Liam's got Mortal Kombat. And they'd come over and I would just beat the daylights out of them. And I remember, like, there was actually kid, he was like, I'm leaving and I'm never coming back. I beat him so bad.
You bruised his ego.
I did, because like everyone's ripping on him. They're like, dude, you lost to a blind guy, and he just couldn't get over that.
Did you participate in the Sento Showdown?
No, I'm not really. So I don't play on a like competitive level. I play to have fun, and I just don't have enough time to like really practice and learn the game the way that others do. But I think it is cool that that's a thing, and I think it's neat that we're really pushing forward the fact that, hey, listen, blind people are playing these fighting games and they're good at them, and they're, comparatively decent, and I think that's so neat.
Now, a lot of your content, I mean, you kind of got a mixed bag of content out on your YouTube page. I mean, you have PC things, you have console things, you have some mobile things. Maybe first start with, what are some of the mobile things that we'll see, some of the mobile things that you've been involved in?
So I would say the most recent mobile thing that I did was to the Dragon's Cave. Mm-hmm. And mobile has been kind of hard for me because I love mobile. I mean, who doesn't, right? It's a computer in your pocket. My issue has been broadcasting it in such a way where if it's got visuals, people can see the visuals. Apple is kind of restrictive and makes it hard to do what I want to do. So invariably, mobile's been kind of harder to do now. And I've really ramped up my like professional. So if I'm doing a game and the game has visuals, I want you to see the visuals. Because I believe that we live in a sighted world, and we're going to have a lot of sighted people looking at our content. And if all they see is a blank screen or someone's face, they're not going to stick around. So I really focus now very hard on making sure that there is something to see. Obviously, some of the games that I play, so like on the audio only side, something like Crazy Party or even my own games, they don't have visuals. And so I do have a screen that will be like, hey, this is an audio only game. No, your screen isn't broken. But like invariably, if I know that it's got visuals, I want to stream the visuals. And so it's been a little disheartening because there's a lot of mobile games I'd love to play. I mean, I'd love to even do like 7 Little Words or some of these word games because I love puzzle stuff. But, again, without being able to stream the visuals, it's kind of, I don't want to do it. But I did to the Dragon's Cave. That was really fun. If you haven't checked that out, I would highly recommend checking it out. It's a fun little adventure. Actually has some diverging paths. It's kind of simple, kind of takes us back to some of the older games of say 4, 5, 6 years ago. So like maybe a less scary Papa Sangre, stuff like that. But I would definitely recommend looking at that. I think it's pretty fun.
There's a couple things I love about that. So
Yeah.
I've reviewed that game. I've interviewed the developers
Oh,
of that
cool.
game, and I wrote an article for PocketGamer.com about that game. And there's two things I really love about it, which is one, the protagonist of that game is a blind person. You know,
Yeah.
the princess, you know, it's kind of flipping the script. She's blind and she's the princess, but yet she's the one who's saving the day, which I just like that juxtaposition. The second thing, if you don't know, and you can read about it in my article, one of the developers of that game is blind, and her husband, who is did stuff in computer programming, really was just upset that she couldn't play the same games that he enjoyed. So he went out and created a first-person shooter for her to play that they could play together. And I just think that's just a great story.
That is really cool. And I love stories like that because it's so neat when someone actually goes, yeah, you know what, we need to do something to make. And we're seeing that a lot more now with, like, obviously not to stray too far, but like Stardew Valley, for example, on PC. Unfortunately, sorry, not on mobile, which would be amazing. If you could do mobile mods, I think Stardew Valley would be a lot of fun to play on your phone. But obviously somebody that is not necessarily blind was like, hey, I want to make a mod to make this game playable for blind people. And just talking to the number of people that are realizing that blind people do face significant challenges and they want to try to help. I do a lot of studies for Columbia University and like UCLA, and we do a lot of stuff with research, and just talking to the students that are like, yeah, you know, we really want to make things to improve blind people's lives has really been staggering.
Yeah, and to be honest, it's a passionate player base, because when we get a game that is actually fun that we can play, and something that is mainstream like Stardew Valley, you know, that's something that you'll get us to buy and play.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And then that's something that I tell developers is, listen, we are a small base, right? There's not a lot of us, but we are very passionate about games because we don't have a lot to play. So when you give us something, we're very happy that you gave us something. And we're very passionate and we're very loyal.
Now, speaking of another game that you're playing on computer, we were talking about this a little bit before we started, but you're playing a game by My True Sound, who I interviewed a couple months back, that just put out a game on PC. But we were talking about, you know, do you think that game could also be on mobile? And so maybe just tell people a little bit about what is that game, what do you do in that game, and why you think it fits on mobile.
I am really huge on this game right now. This game has been a lot of fun. It's called Kilta, and it is a auto battler. And for those that aren't really familiar, an auto battler is you take characters, you set them up, and they fight, and you sit back and munch on popcorn and watch. Which I know it might sound boring, but it's not. It's really fascinating. It's really cool. The story is interesting. It's kind of wacky, and it's just a lot of fun. All the heroes that you can recruit are so different. They all have their own personalities. They all have their own play styles. And essentially you put equipment on your heroes and you send them out to fight, and you can influence the battle through a couple skills. So you're not completely bereft of options. But one of the really cool things about the game is that it plays really well on PC, but I also think that it would be a shoe-in for mobile. The game itself just is designed, I think, as sort of a casual game, and I could see someone picking it up on their phone and playing it and having a good time with it. And the way that the accessibility has been done, and they did an amazing job on this, I really have to commend them, because I really do feel like they went over and above. They created a game that really was primarily visual. There's a lot of very beautiful artwork, amazing soundtrack, but they created more of a mainstream game. This is not designed as an audio experience. It's designed as a mainstream game. And they actually took the time and went and built an accessibility overlay, which they didn't have to do, but they did it well. And one of the really cool things is, when the game released last week, I streamed it, and one of the developers hung out, which, by the way, if you're a developer and someone's streaming a game, hang out, because let me tell you, we love that. I love knowing that you're watching me play your game, and I love being able to talk to you and strike up a dialogue, even if it's just through chat. It is so much fun. But essentially, they took a bunch of stuff, went back, fixed a few things, put out a patch a few days later, and it's amazing. But to answer your question, yes, it is a shoe-in on mobile. I think people would adore it. I don't know if it's feasible for them to do from a programming aspect or just a financial aspect, but I would love to see it happen. So if you guys are watching this, please make it happen. I mean, you've heard me say it like a few times already, so it's not like I haven't said it before, but yes, this would be an amazing mobile game. I think it would sell a lot of units. I think it would move a lot of sales. I know a lot of blind people that have said like, and they've said on stream, hey, if this comes to iPhone or Android, I'm buying it. Like, no question.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was really interesting when they explained it to me a couple months ago. My hope is, they have a history of putting their game out on PC and then, porting it, or whatever the right term is, over to mobile. And I'm hoping that is what happens here.
So without going into a deep technical dive, porting it is completely possible. They're using what's called Unity, and Unity does cross-platform games.
Yeah.
And so
not the most successful.
No, but I mean, again, that's not, unfortunately, I mean, obviously for us as developers, no, it's not. But the cool thing is for developers that can see I don't want to say it's trivial, but I don't think it would take a lot of work. I want to be careful how I say this because I don't want to cheapen the work. Obviously, there has to be design changes made, but I think it's doable.
We'll keep our fingers crossed.
That's what I'm saying. If you're listening to this, cross your fingers and toes.
Yeah.
And also, too, if you're listening to this, tweet My True Sound. Let them know and like send them an email and be like, hey, listen, I love your game. I'd love to play it on mobile because honestly, that's what gets developers to do this. If they know the interest is there and they know there's a return on their investment, I think they'll make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're really nice people.
They are. David and all of them with the Finnish names that I can't pronounce are just really great people.
Right. Now, the other thing, and I don't think we can mention the name, so I just want to be careful that we don't do that. But the other thing that I noticed, I have reviewed a game that is coming out soon. And I happened to be looking at the credits of who backed this particular game that is coming out soon. And I saw your name. It's a mobile game. And I thought that was pretty interesting to see, you're kind of putting your money behind some of these accessibility developers as well. So, I mean, maybe say a little bit about that experience and whether you've done it anywhere else, or was that a unique experience?
I'm very supportive. If I see that there's a project and the project looks like it has potential and I feel like, hey, this could be a thing, I'm very supportive of developers and even developers that are just starting out. I'm very supportive of them because I think we need more people to try to do things. And so, yeah, a lot of developers get my support. It's not always financial because sometimes you just can't swing that. But I've always told developers, listen, if you're building something, talk to me. I can't guarantee that I will cover it just because I think my problem, and it's a flaw of mine, and I will totally admit to it publicly, is that if something doesn't interest me, I don't tend to play it. And my logic on this is, if it doesn't interest me, I can't make it fun for you. Right. Because I can go play something, but if I'm not enjoying it or I'm not into it, you know that. And the last thing I want to do is be fake. I don't want to pretend like I'm having a good time. I don't want to pretend like I'm engaged because it's like I'm a big fan of Mr. Rogers. I'm totally digress, but this will make sense in a moment. And I know one of the things that Mr. Rogers had always said was, people asked him, they're like, "Are you always like this?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Listen, if you pretend to be something you're not, people will see through that." And he goes, especially kids. Kids will know that you're faking it and they won't trust you. He said, so you have to be authentic. And I live by that. So sometimes like a developer will be like, I made this thing. And I'm like, hey, listen, this is really cool. And I think it's awesome what you're doing, but it's not for me.
Right.
And I think sometimes people get a little upset by that, but it's like, listen, I don't want to be fake. I want this. I am who I am. I wear my heart on my sleeve. Obviously when I'm on YouTube, I'm a little more professional than I would be off YouTube, but
well, that's the other thing. It's like you're like live playing it.
Yeah.
I have a different. So I now have over 90 reviews of accessible games that I have out on the group that I've posted out to the community, and I purposely seek out all sorts of different genres. And
Yeah.
I try to look at, well, what haven't I covered recently? Let me cover that. And not all of those genres are my favorite thing to play, but they're somebody's favorite thing to play.
Right.
And I want to make sure that when people go and say, all right, well, now there's a list here of 90 accessible games. Let me see what's on this list that I like. I want them to be sure that they have something that's for them. And then the hardest thing for me is separating, is this a good game for what it is versus how do I feel about this type of game?
Right.
And really, that sometimes is a hard blurred line to really separate, to where I have to be like, okay, am I feeling this way? Because I just don't like.
It's so hard because I did a review. I did a stream. I think it was like a year and a half ago, and I really ripped a game up one way, down the other, and the developer was really upset about it. And they're like, "Listen, you did not give this a fair chance. You played this much and then rendered an opinion, and that's not really fair." And I was like, you're right. I didn't. And I went back and played it, and I didn't like it all that much better, but I went and actually tried it. And so I learned a lesson. Well, I learned a few lessons, and one lesson I learned, and I think Uncle Ben taught us this, which is, with great power comes great responsibility.
I thought you were going with Ben Kenobi, so I was waiting for some different quote. But
I mean, who's the fool? The fool or the fool that follows, or whatever that quote is. Right. No, but Uncle Ben taught us that, right? Like, with great power comes great responsibility. And if you're going to be an advocate, and you're going to be somebody that is a content creator and somebody that is an influencer, I hate that term, but I mean, let's call a spade a spade. You have to understand that, listen, you can influence people in good and bad ways, right? And so it's very important to try to be neutral to a point. Obviously, if I don't like something, I don't like it. But there's times where I've been like, listen, I don't like this, but here's what I do like about it, and this is what I think you would like about it. But yeah, I mean, I felt really bad. It was this, I don't know if they ever released it for iOS. It was a game called Hellhunter Anti-Gnomon.
Oh, yeah,
it was made by the guys that did a lot of one of the Italian.
They did a Blind Quest.
Yeah. I call them the Italian contingent because there's so many different games, right?
Right, and then what's the Fury one?
I was going to call it Fury Road. That's what I always call it. I know. Fury Driver or whatever it is.
Exactly. Fury
I actually didn't mind that game. I bailed out on the second one towards the end.
But
I felt really
it's
bad.
The same. So I have probably maybe a similar issue, maybe as you. It's clunky. It's just a clunky setup.
It is, but I love the idea though. I thought the idea was really cool, and it was one of those things where like I really enjoyed what they were trying to do, but I got to the point where I'm like, I just can't anymore, and I felt really bad.
One of my reviews on a Blind Quest, which is same sort of setup, is I dreaded the fights just because they were boring, and I just don't want to do this fight. And
there's been a running joke on my stream, which is probably a little unfair, but one of the running jokes is I can either do this horrible thing or play Blind Quest. And so that's been kind of the running like kind of jokes on stream. Someone will be like, "Hey, will you play Blind Quest?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I'd rather do this instead." And it's usually something really horrendous, but Blind Quest was not a bad thing. So Hellhunter, I don't know if that came to iOS.
It did.
Okay.
I reviewed that. I actually thought that one was the best of that set.
Now, when they did the update, did they do the stuff for deaf and hard of hearing people? I don't know if the update got pushed to iOS, but to be fair to the developer, he actually went out of his way, because I was like, I can't hear the sound in my right ear. I have a hearing loss, and I have a lot of respect for him. He was like, okay, I'll fix it. And he actually added some stuff for people that had some hearing issues. So yeah, and I don't mention it often, although it's not something I hide. I'm also partially deaf in my right ear. So I'm kind of like 3.5 senses.
Right. So
I have extra challenges too, which makes it harder to review games and play them, but I do what I can because I love what I do.
Yeah, that is a series. I mean, kind of going back to what I was saying before, I have to sit there and say, I'm not a big fan of this style of game, but somebody is. And so let me just kind of merit of, is it accessible? What do I think of the story? I do kind of mention some of the things when, particularly in Blind Quest, it kept getting in its way of itself, where you couldn't skip, you'd hear the same conversation and you couldn't skip out of it. And you just kept running in, just because you had to keep swiping past it, you kept running into it. That's something they fixed in Antinomon. So
and Antinomon, that was the game that I dissed really bad. And I felt really bad about it because then he was like, hey, that's not fair. And we ended up like, I apologized and played the game, and he was like really cool. And listen, he went and made some changes because I was like, can you fix this? So
yeah, I think again, of those series, that was the highest rated one I gave, just because they introduced some different mechanics. The fights were varied to some degree, faster enemies, stronger hits, it wasn't the same thing every single time. There was one thing that they added that I actually got a little, didn't help, which was, go, look in this pile of trash. Oh, you didn't find anything. Well, look at it again. Oh, you didn't find anything. Look at it a third time. Oh, now you found something.
Or my favorite thing was do these things, but you have to do them in a certain order.
Right. Yeah, you need to touch the doorknob, then look into the pile of trash.
right. Because
then the key is there.
Then it's there. Yeah. Right. But some older adventure games kind of did that too. Like if you go back to like really old.
Yeah, but it was kind of it wasn't like you touched the doorknob, which unleashed a latch that opened something up, and it made sense. It was like you touch a doorknob and now there's something in the trash that you didn't find the first time. It's not connected. Yeah. So they were trying to make it varied.
What makes it really difficult is the Italian group. It's a lot of different people making different games, and I don't know if they come out of a university or how that works, but I noticed that it's a lot of different groups, and it feels like it's the same group because it's all kind of sold by the same people. But if you really look, you'll notice that it's like, hey, wow, there's a lot of different people going and working on these things.
Maybe it's everybody's senior project of university.
Yeah.
Work on this game and then we'll sell it. Yeah. So, the mobile games that you've worked in, you've done some. What would you say? Can you remember a specific one that you said, this was a really great experience?
Yeah. So I really liked all the something else like Papa Sangre and stuff, and I'm really heartbroken that those things kind of got discontinued.
Those were before my blind days.
Yes, so. That was an amazing game. Really, really cool. Something that you can get currently. Let's see. I like a lot of people like Sorority Quest. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty cool with Sorority Quest. I like 7 Little Words. A game I really enjoy, and I appreciate that even though they went to Unity, they still went out of their way to like use the Unity plugin and keep that accessible. They have a game called Woven Words, which is also a lot of fun too.
Like that one.
I love that game. That was my companion when I got out of the hospital in 2018. I was sick for a while, and so I played a lot of Woven Words.
The really thing, going back to Sorority Quest, what I really like about that is I was kind of got on that game early, and so I watched it develop, and I watched the developer Charlie really engage with the blind and visually impaired community to make that game accessible and to fix things that weren't working. It's a great collaboration between the community and the developer, and what the developer did for that community.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I think then people got really demanding and wanted everything, and are forgetting that this is a human being who's trying to hold down a day job and work on this game. You gotta give the guy. I was blown away with the content he would get out in the course of a couple of days. Like, oh, you want this, and 3 days later it's actually patched in. It was very impressive. But I think people were getting unrealistic of what this one guy could do.
Well, and I think it's important as gamers to understand that we have to temper our expectations with realism.
Yes.
And I understand, speaking to all you guys, I get it. You want to play it now. It's like, I want this thing. I don't have this thing. My options are limited, but also understand that these are real living, breathing human beings that are making the things for you. Yeah. And you do have to temper your expectations with understanding that, listen, real life is real life. We all live it, right? And just because you make a thing doesn't mean that you've suspended your life. You still have things that you have to do. You still eat, sleep, work, live, feel. And, some people, I'm not saying that they do, but I'm just saying, keep in mind that, people go through mental illness. We go through times that we can't work. We go through, writer's block. We're all humans. And so all I say to people is, hey, listen, treat developers like you want to be treated. And remember that, what they gave, they can take away.
Well, and also, I mean, they're not doing it for free either.
No.
Like they need to, pay for assets.
No, and that's another thing too, is understand that, like, as much as you want the world to be free, time is money. And just because they may not work full time doing it, the hours spent making something are hours that are being taken away from doing something else that could make money. So understand that, and understand that they do need to be compensated for their time. Because I hear that a lot from people. They'll be like, well, how come this company can't just magically make this thing accessible? And I have to go, well, that's because it takes time and money to make it. Well, it doesn't take money. They just have to program it. I'm like, yes, but
you got to pay that person.
You have to pay the programmers for their time.
Right.
And listen, programmers are not cheap. Right. They're very expensive.
There was also, this sense, I just saw this, or heard this meme, I should say, as opposed to see, that was in a writing group. So I wrote a book, and so I'm in all these like writing author support groups, and someone posted this thing that said, I think it's too much, $2.99 is too much for your book. And then the response was underneath it was, didn't you just spend $7.99 for a greeting card that has 11 words in it? So I'm not going to pay $2.99 for your $100,000 or 100,000 word book or whatever, 200,000 word book, but I'll pay $7.99 for 11 words.
Yeah, value is hard, right? Because like people try to value games, and so they'll be like, well, I think this game is worth this much, but it's like, where are you getting that value from? What because what might be valued $2.99 to you might be valued $8.99 to somebody else. Like, let the developer think what they think is a fair value, and if you think it's fair, that's fine. But you can't be like, no, this is too much just because it's an arbitrary amount. Like, listen, developers have responsibilities. We have to pay back the people we spent money to have do work.
Yeah, when I review games,
artists got to get paid. So.
When I review games, I put the price there, but I never, in the review, say, oh, this is too expensive for what it is or whatever. Because again, that's my opinion, but it's not necessarily your opinion. So I don't pull price into it. No. For me personally, what I always try to think of when I start thinking, oh, $5.99 for this game, is like, all right, well, I would pay $10 to go to a maybe 2-hour movie. And is this game going to give me more than 2 hours enjoyment? Usually that answer is far exceeded by 2 hours, right? And so I'm like, why am I complaining about $5.99? I'd be willing to spend, a lot more for a lot less time of enjoyment. So that's how I kind of personally look at it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also, I think from working in the sort of the developer sort of field, it's like, I'll also look at like, what does this thing have? What have they put into it? And I can kind of equate that into my head of like, no, I understand why they're charging this. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard. And I see it a lot more now in the community. People will be like, that's $10. That's too much. And it's like, no, dude, you can't like do it that way because it,
The only thing that I have that I think is really legitimate, and I've talked to this about with developers, is to say, with the blind community, is we don't want to spend $9.99 to find out that the game is not accessible or that there's a game breaking inaccessibility to the game.
Yeah.
So, I really like the models where it's, here you can play the first 3 levels for free. And then, if you want to go past level 3, now you got to pay. That shows me, this game, I know what this game is. I know it's fully accessible or accessible enough. And yes, now I will pay to go forward. I really like that model because that gives us an opportunity.
I do too. And it gives you, it's a try before you buy thing.
Right.
It's kind of like going to a bookstore and looking at a book and being like, oh yeah, this is for me. I want to buy this.
Yeah. You get to at least read the back cover of the book.
Exactly.
And for me, that's a lot of my reviews is I want to get out particularly games that are paid is like, yes, if you buy this game, it is accessible. You can feel confident that if this sounds like something that's interesting to you, that you can play it. So don't worry about that component of, I'm going to spend $2.99 or $5.99 or $9.99, but this game isn't going to be accessible. I kind of, draw that out in the reviews so that people know.
No.
Now, accessibility, as we've discussed, is not the easiest thing. You've been on kind of both ends as a player as well as a developer to some degree,
Yep.
as a backer of games as well. What do you really think is the biggest roadblock to increasing the amount of accessibility that is out there?
So I think there's a couple of roadblocks. I think one of the roadblocks is obviously time versus return. So if I am a company and somebody says, hey, you should make your game accessible, I have to ask myself, okay, is the work that I'm going to put in going to net me a return? And in a lot of cases, it doesn't. And so I think a lot of times companies do take losses on accessibility. I think sometimes it's worth it because it's obviously good press. And so obviously, hey, it's a nice human interest thing. And that's not a bad thing because human interest stories are good.
How much free press did Last of Us Part 2 get? I mean,
a lot. I mean, really. I mean, there was a lot of stuff on accessibility. It was in a number of magazines. Obviously, I don't think it made a huge impact. I mean, the game sold like 5 million units, right? On very quickly, but it didn't do that because of accessibility. It might have sold a few thousand, honestly, which is small, but also,
I would counter that a little bit. I mean, I think you definitely maybe sold a few thousand, maybe 10,000 if we want to get high, to people who are actually saying, oh, I am blind or I have a disability and I'm going to, maybe go buy that. But with the free press, how many people became more aware of the game? Just like a commercial tells them, "Oh, Last of Us
I think a lot.
And I saw that game and that looks kind of cool, and I'm going to go buy that." So
for sure.
I think it sold more because of the accessibility, just because of
the
free press.
What I think it did too, which was super important, and I'm glad to see a company do it, is it's giving us analytical data that we did not have. So we're actually, one of the things that Last of Us 2 does is it tracks how much the screen reader feature is used. And so if you can track this data, you have a really good idea of how many people are actually using this, how many people bought this for this, how many, and that's data that we don't have. And as a company wants empirical data, right? And they can be like, yeah, you know what? We were able to have 10,000 unique players use this feature. And I think Naughty Dog did some stuff at one of the conferences and did go through some of the analytical data. I don't remember it, but I
remember it being, it was way higher than they thought. Like, particularly things like closed caption being turned on was something like 40% of the people would turn that on. When I was sighted, I would turn that on all the time, just because sometimes a word gets muffled or there's some noise that happens, and I would be that way. I could just look down real quick and see what it was said. And they said people were using it. Their partner was asleep in bed, and they were really just playing on mute, and they were just reading that's how some people were doing it. So not really for an accessibility reason, but for just a lifestyle reason.
But how awesome that is, that though, like, to actually capture analytical data and be able to say, like, now we have empirical data on what people are actually doing, because we don't really have that. Like, we never really did before. So that's what I think is a big thing that Naughty Dog did that I think got kind of overlooked in the shuffle, which, to me is huge, because if you want to sell something and you want people to do something, you have to give them data on how successful it's going to be and why they should do it.
What I'm really hoping to, since that's an internal Sony studio, that they're going to really be kind of sharing their accessibility overlay to everybody else. So it'll be just easier for the next person behind them to actually do it.
Yeah, come on, MLB, let's go.
Right, exactly. So speaking of that, I'm glad you said that, because that makes me think of another question. What game is not accessible that you really wish was?
Oh, gee, you got like an hour? There's so many, right? Like, obviously MLB is a big one for me because I love baseball. Go Cubs. Even though we're not doing really well right now. But I love baseball. So MLB would be a big one. And I don't think it would be difficult to do. It would take some work, but I think it's attainable to at least improve some things. But really, to me, it's not so much that I want one particular game. I just want developers to focus on it and put a little more work into it. And So it'd be nice to like be like, hey, that game looks cool. Maybe I can actually play it. RPGs, anything RPG based, I think would be a shoe-in for accessibility. Why not? You know, but it's hard to just say one game because there's not one dream game of mine that I would love to just be able to play. I want to play all the things. I want to have all the experiences.
That's, definitely a good answer. Mine, when you said MLB, it made me think of mine, which
Okay.
is also baseball related. And I think why this is just such a spur in my seat is because baseball is such an, auditory experience. That is one of the few sports you can just put on the radio and
Yes.
fully understand what is going on.
Yes,
A
absolutely.
blind person can fully participate in that sport. And there was a game I played that I loved as a sighted person called Out of the Park Baseball,
Oh,
which
I
is
think I remember that.
yeah, which is a baseball simulation game. And you're not swinging the bat, but what you're doing is
Right.
you're buying and selling the players, and you're setting up your stadium and deciding how many seats and what the concessions are going to be, and it's a simulation game as opposed to like MLB where you're really swinging the bat per
Well,
se.
one of the cool things too about MLB is you can do some of that simulation stuff
Right.
now. So
Yep.
it's like you could theoretically do franchise mode and
Right.
actually make those decisions and let the audio coach do
Right.
the stuff, play the game for you.
Yeah. That's
But if
that's
we
a
can just make the menus, because I would love that. Let
yeah.
me run a franchise. Let me buy and sell players for the Cubs. Like,
And the thing that gets me particularly about this one, because a lot of it is just a table of information, right?
right.
Here's your player, here's all their stats, slot them into what position you want. I mean, it's really, as I thought, this can't be that hard. And do you know the game Football Chairman Pro?
I don't, but I think I've heard of it.
Okay, it's a soccer. You're the
I've heard
GM
of
of a
like
soccer team.
Football Manager, so
Yeah,
it might be one of those.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's along those lines. It's
Yeah.
been downloaded 2 million times. It's very, very popular game. But it's basically, I mean, if it weren't soccer, if it was baseball, it's exactly what Out of the Park Baseball was.
Yes.
So I know it's possible on a mobile phone to do what I think, Out of the Park Baseball should be able to do, because Football Chairman Pro is just soccer overlay, and it just bothers me so much. Like, I have written those developers, I have sent them messages, and I've gotten nowhere with them, and I just really
And
really
it's so
hope.
frustrating because it, again, there's so many games that can be made accessible, and the problem is developers don't think about it, and when you talk to them, it's always too late in the process. And so obviously anybody that has an accessibility background, whether it's doing testing or doing helping compliancy, one of the things that they teach us, what is it? Accessibility should be one of your first steps in the process.
Yes,
And
thought of from the beginning.
yes, you think of it from the beginning. It cannot be an 11th hour fix. That's something that I think is super important, because I've worked with companies that have been like, yeah, we want to do accessibility, and then you sit down and talk to them and you realize that they don't have a direction, and it's not their fault, but it's no one thought about it, and now they're trying to shoehorn it in, and you can't do it that way.
Right.
And I've seen companies have success, but not the same success if you did it from the start.
Absolutely. Now, maybe along those lines, same thread. I mean, we as players, as gamers, what would be your suggestions for us to, really make further progress in the accessibility movement?
So I think one thing that we have to do as gamers is we have to show we're interested, and really to do that is we have to be en masse, and we have to write to companies and be like, hey, listen, this is what we'd like to see. But we also have to have realistic expectations. So what I mean by that is you can't write to a company and be like, I want your first person shooter to be completely accessible for blind people, because
And for
that's
free.
not really, yeah, but it's not really realistic.
Right.
So we have to also set, as gamers, we have to set realistic goals, and we have to be like, listen, I know that this may not be fully accessible, but I would like to see this feature or this thing done, or this sort of genre of game. There's some genres that just are not going to lend themselves well to accessibility because of how we as blind people have to interact with things.
Well, it's interesting you say that as well. So again, this game that's coming out, which I don't think I can say what the name is,
Right.
that you backed, and I have since also backed. They are creating a game in a space that really is something that you would historically say this is really not possible for blind people. It's just too hard to do.
Right.
But they are kind of doing it. It's not perfect, but it's progressing and it's moving the needle to a more fully realized game in that particular genre.
Right.
And to me, it was that was actually a financial backing of. I said, look, for them, they want to keep going and they want to go further with this, but they need some money to do that. And I donated money to them to do that. So, we have to. When we see something that is really compelling, just don't expect it to happen on its own.
Right.
We need to support, whether we buy their games, review their games, mention their games, or donate to their games, or Kickstarters,
Yes,
GoFundMes,
and share
Patreons.
that with your friends and let them know and get the word out, because obviously that's what really does it. But it's true. I mean, and we're seeing a lot more stuff now, especially with technology that was not previously possible. And so I do hope that we will see more developers kind of go, hey, listen, this is doable. We want to do it. I also hope that developers will budget more money for accessibility. And that's honestly, that is, I think you had asked me earlier what one of the biggest pitfalls was. I would say budgeting is what gets us every time, because when a company sets out a budget, accessibility is usually a very small budgeted item. And so they only have so much money to work with. And once that money's gone, it's gone. That's it. Whatever we got done, we got done. So I don't know how we as gamers affect that change, other than showing, listen, we will buy your games, we will buy your products, and we will buy them in such a way where you'll actually get a return on your investment. How we do that, I don't know, other than support. We just support these companies and we show that we're interested. But when they can start budgeting more money and doing more stuff, yeah, that's when we're going to see change, I think.
Right. So with all the various games that you cover out on your YouTube page, whether it be PC or mobile or console, I mean, how are you finding out, hey, there's an accessible game and I should go look at Stardew Valley? Are you following, who are you following, or what content are you following?
So I tend to follow like Ian Hamilton on Twitter is really cool. He posts a lot of accessibility things. I don't think he necessarily posted about Stardew Valley. I had actually found out through another friend. And they had told me. I tend to find out from others. So others will approach me and they will be like, hey, Liam, you might want to know about this. And they're a little more clued in than I am, because I'm doing so many other things. I don't always catch up on all the news and what's hot and what's not. And then sometimes too, like I'll be approached, about certain things. Like someone will be like, I made a thing. You might want to know about it because I know that you're interested in gaming and you stream. And so usually it's, I made a thing, can you stream it? But sometimes it's just, hey, I made a thing, can you tell people about it? And if you like it, stream it.
And any publications or websites or anything that you follow?
Let me see. So audiogames.net is a decent one. There is a forum that I do see things posted on. It's kind of hit or miss, but I don't know of anything really that I can be like, yeah, there's a great news site. I think that's something we do need, is like some sort of news, sort of like, hey, this is what's new in gaming accessibility for blind people. There is no sort of like, I can't give you like, here's a thing with articles and like an RSS feed and stuff. That might be a need that somebody could fill in. So if you're listening out there and you want to do it and make it happen, go ahead.
So most of your stuff is kind of a word of mouth type of.
Yeah, a lot of it's word of mouth. There is no sort of central news repository.
And then, with the content that you have out on your site, do you have a particular schedule that you follow? Are you, every day at 6 or,
not really. I need one. Honestly, that would be very helpful for me. It kind of goes something like, what's going on today? Do I have a Zoom meeting? Do I have class? Am I working? What, do I have to cook dinner? When do I start cooking dinner?
Right.
So I kind of work around what my schedule is going to be. And I also have to think about, I have viewers in Australia. I have viewers in Europe. I have viewers in California. So I like to stagger my times around so that you may have missed the stream because it was on at 3 a.m. Australian time, but you can catch the next one because it's at a later time. So it's a balancing act. if you can do things at a specific time, I think it's helpful for people because they always know when it's going to be there. But I do try to tell people when something's coming up so they're forewarned. So no, I don't have a particular schedule. I do try to stream every couple days. If there's something that's big, I'm streaming it every day. So Stardew Valley has been kind of like an everyday, every other day thing. Obviously, work is, demanding of my time. And then if I start school, then that adjusts my schedule even further. But so for those that know me, like you might know that I lived in Chicago for 36 years and I just moved to Missouri a few months ago. And so living at home had certain challenges. My grandmother is very old and she's not in good health. And so the noise level, you have to keep it down. You can't be making a bunch of noise, right? So it really curtailed when I could stream. When I got here, I actually, a couple times I streamed at 2 a.m. because I could.
Right.
So I can do that now. Although I just figured out that apparently my office wall shares a wall with my neighbors. So I think my office is on their bedroom.
Oh no.
So I'm like, I kind of have to think about that and not be yelling at 2 a.m. And
maybe you can put the desk on the other wall.
I would love to move we have a 3-bedroom place. I'd love to have put the office on the outer wall, but it's the way we did things. So my girlfriend has her craft room, and honestly, my girlfriend's craft room looks like someone robbed Hobby Lobby and set up a storefront in a room, because there is just cube storage of yarn going about 6 feet tall around the entire room. You could put a kitten in this room. This thing would have things to do for weeks.
She doing like needlepoint, or
she does a lot of crocheting. She actually makes really cool animals and sells them. So, but yeah, the whole room is like yarn. So I had thought, I'm like, hey, can we move the office? And I'm like, no, because I'm going to have to move all these cubes. So never mind.
For the next move, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Next well, Liam, I really appreciate you taking the time, telling us about your journey in gaming and accessibility, and telling people about the content that you have out on your YouTube page, which Absolutely. I will be sharing the links in the description. So again, if you want to see more of what Liam's doing, I think he shared with me his Twitter handle as well as his YouTube page. So we can definitely put that in the description, and please go check out the content he's doing. And Liam, I always like to turn it over to you guys at the end to just any kind of final thoughts you have for the community of blind and visually impaired gamers.
Not really. I just want to say, thank you to you for giving me the opportunity to come and talk about something that is near and dear to my heart. And I would say that, I think we are on a upward trajectory for gaming and accessibility. And I would say, keep supporting your local developers and show them love and play their games. And, obviously too, if you find my content interesting and you want to learn more, please check out my YouTube and my Twitter. Help me grow what I'm doing. I'd love to reach more people and help keep making a difference. And, ultimately at the end of the day, I just want to leave the world a better place than I found it when I got here.
Oh, excellent. That's a good mission. And you're always welcome to, post anything that you're doing out on our Facebook group. It's about anything that's about gaming accessibility.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know you had I will join it post haste.
Yeah. So
no pun intended.
I will be sure to share that link with you, but that's, where all these interviews and reviews and things happen out on that Facebook group. And we always welcome, content creators as well as game developers. If you're, want to say something about a gaming accessibility, you can feel free to, announce it out to the group.
Yeah,
so
thank you so much. That'd be amazing.
Welcome. All right. Well, thank you, Liam, very much. And we look forward to all your future content.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.